Hello, great thinkers, and welcome back to another episode of the Think Great Experience. You are in for a treat today. I have a Marine Corps veteran, uh, award-winning entrepreneur, international bestseller. I'm trying to think if I missed anything. Former firefighter, keynote speaker, and just all-around amazing guy. Zach Green, so great to have you here today. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you, my ball-headed brother.
Yes. And we are connected outside of haircuts on so many levels. We both served in the Marine Corps. We're both entrepreneurs. We both love making an impact in the veteran community. But I just have to say, I got to start off with, if you could just tell us a little bit about what we're looking at behind you. I know there's some devil dogs listening to this right now that their eyes are going all over the place. You just gave me a little tour, but can you just start off by telling us a little bit about your background there?
Sure. So this has been my lifelong dream. I am a huge fan of World War One, specifically the Marine operations in World War One. And at a very young age, I started collecting memorabilia and posters, but I had no place to put them. So we finally moved down here to beautiful Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. And I told my wife, look, there's a storage room above the garage. You can have the whole house, but this is my area. And so I've compiled a list of probably the largest collection of World War One memorabilia in the entire United States. These are all original recruiting posters. I have over here original covers. Again, these are all the posters. And then if we look over here, you can see some of the other posters. Again, these are all 100% original. And one of the other things that I get a chance to do is once a month, as the Marines are participating in the Crucible, which for those of you who don't know is 54 hours of literally no sleep. They hike over 50 miles. And at the very end, that's when they get their Eagle Globe and Anchor. Well, myself and a couple other Marines dress up in historical Marine outfits. So I represent World War One. This is all 100% reproduction, but mil spec exact. And we come out of the woods and join them for the last 5 miles of the hike and talk about history and tradition and honor. And then the most proud thing I have in here is if you look down at the floor in here, that little wood floor was actually from a friend of mine that was stationed in Jacksonville in Camp Lejeune. They were tearing down the officer housing, and they found out one of the houses was where Chesty Puller lived. So they said, you can take anything you want. And he actually took the floorboards. So I made my own little yellow footprints with Chesty Puller's floor on it. And the tradition is as you stand on the floor, Chesty's floor, you take a shot of bourbon. And this bourbon is a special bourbon because I have it infused with wood that I brought back from Bellow Woods. Wow. So you get a chance to do a shot of Bellow Woods bourbon standing on Chesty's floor. And any Marine at any time that comes down to Hilton Head, you're always welcome to come visit. I always have a glass of bourbon and a cigar waiting for you. So all you got to do is reach out, and I can give you the website of the kind of museum tavern that I've created up here.
I love that you called it the Marine Corps Speakeasy. You got a password, Semper Fi, to get in. I'm getting Sapphire on this so I can get out there to see it. I don't have any client work out there right now, but we need to strategize about some warrior business. That's what I'm hearing.
We'll make it a tax deductible trip for you.
There you go. I love that. And you know what's great about that recruiting poster you have there and World War One, that era, that's when the Germans gave us our infamous nickname, the Devil Dogs.
That is right there. So Teufelhunden. And more importantly is the story and what that represents. And you know, Bellow Woods gets all the oxygen in World War One, and we could literally spend a whole podcast talking about Marine operations in World War One and how they really changed the moving from the Civil War area, Napoleonic type of battle tactics, which is shoulder to shoulder and just march up. The machine gun changed everything. But because of the leadership of people like Dan Daly and General Pershing and those other Marines, we were able to quickly adapt from that Napoleonic fighting. So by the time we got to the Battle of Blanc-Mont, which was the most significant World War I battle, unfortunately, a lot of people don't think about it. We were able to use things like combined arms and creeping artillery fire and bounding and the other type of things. So just in a few months, the Marines were able to just completely transform 150 years of what we had done in that time. And there's so much we can learn from those operations in modern day business and life for that
That's
matter.
right. Just an amazing era of transformation. Um, and I think that the warrior ethos, that mindset that you talk about of being a warrior, to be able to transform from the way things were to the way things need to be is a remarkable characteristic. And I gotta ask about your Marine Corps career. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because every Marine that earns the Eagle Globe and Anchor, they have a slightly different pathway, a journey that they go down. And mine involved aviation as an air traffic controller, going in open contract, didn't even know what an air traffic controller was, and then I'm talking to Top Gun. I mean, it was crazy. But tell us a little bit about your decision to join the Marine Corps. What was that like, and what was your pathway?
So it's very interesting because in some ways it was very insignificant, in other ways it was very significant. I knew when I was about 4 or 5 years old that I wanted to join the Marine Corps.
Wow.
No one in my family had been in the military. Not only that, my family was liberal, very anti-gun. I was not even allowed having squirt guns growing up, and go figure, I joined the infantry.
There you
Um,
go.
I'll never forget kindergarten. The teacher asked us to draw a picture painting of something that makes you happy, and everyone's drawing pictures of their parents and stick figures holding hands and rainbows and unicorns, and I draw a picture of a bunch of communists getting run over by tanks, airburst artilleries, heads and shoulders flying through the air,
Sure.
Russian sickle and hammer
Yeah.
under the
The real
ground.
world.
They send me to the principal's office, and next thing you know, I'm at the psych ward at Cincinnati Children's Hospital getting an evaluation. And they realize, okay, well, they said something that makes you happy. And I told them, look, I want to defend freedom and conquer those that want to take that away from us. And so
I love that.
early on, they knew something wasn't right. I went to about 7 different schools from kindergarten through high school: Catholic schools, Montessori schools, private schools, public schools. I always was the round peg in the square hole. And people always told me, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you're not going to really amount to anything. And I remember walking in the Marine Corps recruiting office, and I had just been to the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force offices, and they were telling me about all these great things they're going to do. And I walk in with a little bit of a swagger. I'm 18 years old. Had to wait till I was 18 because my parents wouldn't sign for me until they didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
And I said, what can the Marine Corps do? And he looked at me and kind of laughed. He said, son, we've been the finest fighting force for 200 something years, and will continue to be that great with or without you. He said, the
Wow.
question is, what can you offer us? And I thought for a second, and he said, you know what? You're not even strong enough to make it through Paris Island. There's no way you can do that.
Wow.
And I grabbed the contract out of his hands figuratively, signed it on the spot. Next thing you know, I'm on the yellow footprints of Paris Island. And let me tell you, it was rough. And I really struggled. I couldn't understand why the guys in the platoon with me that grew up in the coal mines of West Virginia with dirt floors, that had the projects of Philadelphia where they didn't even know when their next meal was coming, why they were doing so good. And here I am
Yeah.
with an upper class family that spoiled me and did everything.
Right.
Why was I failing? And that really starts the journey that I'm on right now, this warrior journey. So, I
Mm.
had my moment like we all do. I did a column left when we were supposed to go right. The heavy pulls me aside for some incentive training. Before you know it, he leans over and says, your mama's not here to help you. And it just
Yeah.
cut deep. And I started crying uncontrollably. I remember him about facing, walking back to the platoon, and I'm by myself, and my tears, literally seeing an abyss open up in front of me. And as the great
Wow.
philosopher Nietzsche says, if you stare long enough into the abyss, eventually the abyss will stare back and consume you. And
Yeah.
that was the moment I decided I was going to transform as a warrior. I was going to conquer what got me there, and I was going to change. And that's when I became a Marine. And
Wow.
ended up graduating recruit training, went off to obviously infantry school, went to artillery school, was assigned to a cold weather infantry unit doing fire direction control for mortars. The following year, I went to OCS, graduated top of my platoon at OCS because I had gotten a chance to get through the challenge and the struggle. And then it was the Clinton years, and everything was getting downsized. There was no
Yeah.
active duty commissions unless you were a JAG or flight. And I declined my commission. I left as
Mm.
a corporal. And 2 years later,
Mm.
September 11th happened.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's kind of where the story leaves off, if you will. I
Yeah.
was just riddled with survivor's guilt. And for
Yeah.
the last 30 years, I have been fighting to make amends with the Marine Corps. The fact that I left, and I served honorably, I served my whole contract,
Sure.
but I felt like I got out at the wrong time. I wanted to fight. And that's really what's brought me to
Yeah.
where I am today, to kind of fix that and now be
Yeah.
able to serve both the Marine Corps and our fellow vets differently now.
It's interesting, Zach. Once you go through that transformation, you are a Marine for the rest of your life. Nobody can take that away from you. And that skill set, all of the skills that you learn in there are so applicable, not just in the business sector, but just life in general. And I remember having my transformation. And I kind of say, anytime you experience something, you're either going to level up from it or level down. And in the Marine Corps, there's that moment in boot camp when you realize I'm going to make it through this. I've got this. And it's such an amazing feeling because certainly the first couple of weeks are life altering, to say the least, where, you might shed some tears in there and you have the self-realization of, can I do this? And I had a similar conversation with my recruiter. He just said, do you feel you have what it takes to be one of the best? And no, none of the other recruiters asked me that. And it just struck a chord with me. And then, you've got to prove that over and over again. And, I got out right after the first Gulf War, and I've had this desire, like you, to work with the veteran, the military community to continue to give back, and to help and support them in many ways, and including our foundation where we award scholarships to military spouses. But I also go around and I work with the recruiting commands, talking about goal setting and sales strategies and even leadership. And it's been an incredible journey. So, I have to ask, you having gone down the pathway, becoming a Marine, a leatherneck, a devil dog, a jarhead, what is your biggest takeaway going into the business sector? Now, you've had an amazing career since the Marine Corps. You started a business out of your trunk that turned into a multi-million dollar operation. But what have you been able to apply from that experience in the Marine Corps into the business sector? Because we can't do everything. We probably don't go on forced marches and 10-mile runs and rappel in the business sector, but there are some commonalities that we can use.
Well, and that's really how my book came together. So I semi-retired a couple of years ago. Was very fortunate. Again, like you mentioned, I had a great career at Eli Lilly in brand development and marketing, was in the software industry, was a firefighter. I got lost in a fire and wanted to create a product to help other firefighters see each other in the dark.
Wow.
I literally sold it door to door out of the trunk of my car. I made $5,000 in 6 months.
Hmm.
My fire chief sat me down and said, Zach, you've got something that's going to revolutionize the fire service. Stop treating this as a hobby. And I remembered a
Wow.
quote from Teddy Roosevelt. He said, when you're faced with a monumental decision, the best thing to do is the right thing. The next best thing to do is the wrong thing, but the worst thing to do is nothing. And I quit my job at Lilly. I went to a trade show. I spent so much money on just the rental of the booth. It was like 30 grand. I didn't have any money for a booth to put in the booth. And so I went to Walmart and bought a soccer tent with sidewalls held together with duct tape and zip ties. I had cardboard signs with black Sharpie markers, and next to me is Honeywell and MSA and all these billion-dollar companies. And the product I invented was a glow in the dark material that was based off of the cat eyes we had on the back of our Kevlar helmets
Yeah.
and the Marines. And it was helping firefighters see each other in the dark, because when you're in the dark, the high vis and the reflective don't work. The
Right. Right.
batteries don't always work. Mr. Murphy and his law of physics, anything can
Mhm.
go wrong, will go wrong at the worst time. We booked $100,000 in sales in 3 days. The problem was
Wow.
I had no money left, so I had no way to produce it. I'm making this stuff practically in my garage. I had no money to buy the raw materials. I had no way to distribute it. And I had 100 grand in orders. And guys start pulling me aside and said, "Look, you are verging on something being illegal. You got to stop taking these orders." And I looked at them and I said, "F you. I'm a Marine. I will
Right.
accomplish my mission. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I know I'll do it."
That's
And it was
right.
brutal. Over the next 10 years, everything that you just asked helped me get it there. Grit, tenacity,
Hmm.
Courage, serenity, teamwork, all those intangibles. JJ did tie buckle, if you
Yeah.
remember back in those days.
Hey.
That's what got me through. And I almost went bankrupt 3 times. I almost died of stress and panic attacks, but I eventually grew it into about a $30 million company.
Wow.
And when I stopped working a couple of years ago, moved down here to Hilton Head. I'm sitting on the beach smoking my cigar, looking at
Mhm.
4 miles away from me across the Port Royal Sound is Paris Island. And I said, you know what? That's how it got started. And the very long answer to your very short question is, what can we learn? Everything. It's the warrior spirit. You've got to have those challenges early on in your career
Yeah.
to prepare you for the big challenges that happen. Iron
Right.
sharpens iron.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, you've got the warrior entrepreneur, your book, and you teach veterans how to build and grow businesses. And I found that so many veterans are entrepreneurial. Have you been discovering the exact same thing?
Actually, I'm discovering the exact opposite. After
Hmm.
World War II, 55% of small business owners were veterans. Do you know what the number is today, Eric?
No.
5.1%. In addition to that, there was a study done where they interviewed Fortune 500 HR executives in recruiting and asked them if they would hire veterans. 46% said no. And the reason they said no is they said they're a liability. They got that PTSD,
Yeah, I
they're
know.
physically challenged. And I was just disgusted when I heard this. But look, we've been at war for 20 years. We've gone through horrible stuff. Some of the injuries, both visible and invisible, were not survivable during Vietnam and World War II, and now we're surviving. So we have a
Right.
honor and responsibility to our brothers and sisters. However, there's other of us that didn't go through combat, that didn't have that, and we're not challenged.
That's right.
And they're taking all of us. And again, I don't want to take anything
I
away from our brothers that have been through more shit than you and I could ever imagine.
Yes.
But we need to change that narrative. And so that's what my passion is now is how can we use that warrior spirit, the things that you learn as an 18-year-old that would probably have ended up in jail had you not gone in the military, and now all of a sudden you're responsible for $1 million budgets and hundreds of troops, and then you come out in the real world, you're way better off than having an MBA from Harvard.
So let me ask you this: since you're working with a lot of veterans and what you refer to as veteranpreneur or how do you say it?
It's hard to say vetrepreneur, but you're correct.
Vetrepreneur. That's what I
Easier to
thought. Okay,
spell it than
vetrepreneur.
say
I
it.
love that. I love it. Vetrepreneur. So why do you think the drastic drop in the amount of veteran entrepreneurs nowadays? Because they certainly have the skills to do it, but why the drop in the implementation of doing it?
So I think there's two. Now, the very easy answer is just volume. There was obviously a lot more veterans during World War II than there is today.
Hmm.
But for some reason, we are not really taking advantage of all the opportunities that are out there, and that's on us. The job of the military should be making great Americans, not defending our country, not doing it's about making great Americans. Part of that being defense of your country, part
Right.
of that is when you take your uniform off. But we're a tool. And when that tool gets dull or it's not used anymore, they throw that tool away. They don't rehab that tool. And
Yeah.
so what happens is when you EAS, they pretty much say, okay, see you later. I mean, yeah, they've got these transitional trains and stuff and
Yeah.
SkillBridge, which is phenomenal. I could talk an hour about SkillBridge, but most commands don't even let you know about it and they don't authorize it. But we need to do this on twofold. A, we got to take care of our brothers and sisters. And it's not the officer, lieutenant colonel that gets out that already has an MBA that's got a
Right.
nice
Right.
six-figure consulting job. I'm talking about the E3s, the hogs, the E4s that get out and they come work for Erik and they're swinging a hammer as a carpenter or a construction worker or a hairstylist. Erik's billing them out at 45 bucks an hour and they're taking home 15 bucks an hour. After a while, they're going to do the math and like, why is the old man getting all this money and I'm doing all the work? So
That's
they
right.
say, you know what? See you later. I'm opening up my own business. And they slap a sticker on the side of their truck. But they've never been trained in HR. They've never been trained in recruiting. They don't know anything about financial management, which is why most construction workers and trades are such horrible business managers because they don't understand the non-operative part of their business.
That's
That's who
right.
I want to capture. Those are the people. If we can give them a framework and a
Yeah.
guideline, just like you had in the military, literally going to the bathroom. There's a field manual for how you go to the bathroom outdoors. All right.
That's right.
We
That's right.
got nothing when we get out. That's the space that I want to play in. And I've developed a program that is more Sesame Street oriented than
Yeah.
Harvard Business School. Infographics, super simple. Just do these three things. And look, if some dumb Marine like me can do it, no
Well,
question, I can get it.
you hit the nail on the head. I mean, when you flip through the 400 pages of the essential subjects manual, there's how to use the restroom in the field. There's how to have a shave. There's pictures with it. I mean, it's flawless on the execution as far as the steps it's showing and the visuals, which we're visual creatures anyways. So you're absolutely right. There is no program. There is no steps for that. And I've encountered so many veterans that I feel have the potential, they have the desire, they just need the roadmap.
That's
So
it.
so at what point did you create the Warrior Entrepreneur, your book? How did that all come about?
So I, my story's crazy, and everyone kept saying you got to put it in a book. And so I started
Yeah.
talking to my editor, and he's like, "Buddy, I'm sorry, but unless your name's Elon Musk or Oprah Winfrey, nobody wants to read your story. But if you could tell a story with your story in it, then there's something there." And I started to look back at
Hmm.
my journey and this progression through this warrior's journey and figured out how can I apply that. And what I learned was, yeah, I can put a little bit of me in there, but I want to talk to people like Erik. I want to talk to people and research the ancient Spartans and the samurai. The samurai spent more time on poetry and
Hmm.
rock gardening and meditation than they did on swords play. Why? Because it gave them diversity, it gave them that ability to
Sure.
challenge things. I talk about the Spartans. I talk about Walt Disney, Momofuku Endo, who invented ramen noodles after he went bankrupt 4 times and got arrested and all this other stuff. And so what I realizes this concept of embracing adversity as a tool to grow. And by the
Yep.
way, to be a warrior, you don't have to be a veteran. You can be a single mom that got out of an abusive relationship and now starting your own business. You can be someone that did something stupid and got thrown in jail for a couple of years and you're trying to come back and regroup. I want to show you how you take that suck and make it better and make it a training tool, a way to, again, iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
And through that book, I got on the speaker circuit, did a bunch of podcasts, and people kept saying, "Well, what's more? I love the book. What can we do?" And so that's really what got me into the journey I am now, which is doing these cohorts and these groups and these coaching with other veterans based off of the warrior entrepreneur philosophy.
Well, just that whole warrior mindset that you talk about is so important. And you touched on something that I encounter every day as a author, as a coach, as a speaker. I really believe that so many people want to tap into the warrior mindset and they want to be this warrior entrepreneur. Or I've got my book coming out. I told you about the Unleash Your Business Warrior. And so when they're in these businesses, there are some people that want to stand out. And you don't have to go to boot camp. You don't have to go to combat. You don't have to deploy to have that mindset. And in fact, most people in the workplace aren't going to be veterans, right? There's a higher number of non-vets than vets, at least in most businesses. And so just getting them to tap into that, I think there's a huge desire out there for non-veterans to learn how to think like warriors.
Well, and that's really where I want to capture that. And the way to do that is through experiential leadership. It's not watching a video, it's not going through a mastermind course. Those things, there's a million of them out there on the internet,
Yeah.
and there's some great ones out there too.
Yeah.
But what I do is I take 4 months and we do weekly workshops, not PowerPoints, workshops. So you actually have to do something each week. I partner you up with battle buddies so we can then talk about your core values. We talk about your quad chart. We talk about your business canvas model. We talk about what's the problem you're solving. We get
Wow.
into that, but then we go to Gettysburg and we do a 3-day immersive experience in Gettysburg where we use Little Round Top and Pickett's Charge as ways to get across communication, tenacity, and how you can use that to battle-proof your business plan. So as we're walking through Pickett's Charge, which is fascinating because on the map, it looks like it's a straight rise up to the
Yeah.
angle. It's not, it actually goes like this. So there's time that Lee can't see his army. There's time that they're out of range from Little Round Top guns and times they're in range. But until you get out there, you can't realize it. And as we're walking through there and you're smelling the grass and you're seeing the sights and hearing the birds, you actually will burn those neuro pathways in your brain that you will never forget it. And I tie that
That's right.
exactly into your business planning, into the challenges of having things that happen in business. The one thing you cannot control in business is change, and whatever you plan for, it's not going to happen, but you can prepare for how you prepare for it. And that's really what, if you go through my program, you really take away with.
That's so awesome. And it kind of brings me back to the basic training component of being in the military where, you spent time in a classroom learning about your rifle. You spent time in a classroom learning about combat maneuvers, but there's nothing like getting in the field or getting on the rifle range. That in-person, in the dirt experience is so valuable. And I agree with you. I think there's too many people that are relying solely on the academic approach to leadership or entrepreneurship, and they got to get their hands dirty. I mean, even in a most basic concept, I talk about with leaders. I'll say, you got to get off site with your people. You got to get off site and build those relationships up. Even if you're virtual, have an off site coffee appointment. But that was something I learned in the Marine Corps. The very first time a staff sergeant took a PFC to breakfast off base, he said, we're going to go off base.
You're
And at
like,
first I
whoa.
thought, I'm in trouble. I'm like, I said, wow, what did I do? And we ended up going to Coco's restaurant in Yuma, Arizona, right off site from the air station. And he just got to know me and asked some questions. And it altered the relationship in such a positive way, because there's only so much that you can do in that classroom setting or even in the workplace. I think you got to get out of it, get away from the training, get away from the distractions, very much like they do when we are developed as leaders. They remove us so that we can build and grow. And that's exactly what you're doing. And that is awesome.
Well, there was three words that my gunner, I had a CWO4 that was my platoon commander, and he had said these three words, and I thought it was the greatest thing. Where he said, "Walk with me." We just
Hmm.
went for a walk together. We were out in the field. He said, "Walk with me." I'm like, man, I get one-on-one time with the gunner. And
Yeah,
he asked me some questions about my job around the Fire Direction Control Center. It was incredible, but that was so exactly what you talked about. It's little things like that that is the difference between
exactly.
leadership and management.
Those little tactics are incredible. And it's so funny that I think sometimes as a vet, I think we do things in the workplace, that we pull from the military, sometimes not even realizing how impactful it was for us. Because walk with me, I, it's so funny. I ran a media company in Southern California. And if you walked around the perimeter of the building, it went around a couple blocks. It took about 10 to 15 minutes to walk around it. Oftentimes, I would tell my leaders, I said, let's go for a walk. And we would walk around and we would have that discussion about what was troubling them, what challenge they were facing. But we got out of the workplace environment, and it was essentially a walk with me moment. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, we're coming up on the Army, the Navy, and the Marine Corps, birthday number 248 this year. There are some amazing things that the military has been doing right for almost 250 years. And like you said, those little tactics, they just go a long way.
Well, I want to touch on something you briefly mentioned, and that was about college and going around there. College has become the biggest detriment to success in our country and our people. And the reason why is this concept of participation trophies and safe spaces. The
Right.
space that should not be safe is college. That is the space that you should be challenged, that you should have discerning views, where the professor is going to make you so mad you want to get out of the class, but he's going to at least debate with you.
That's right.
Instead, what have we done? We've gone to the safe space. We've tattletaled on our professor because he doesn't believe that there's more than male and female. You've got all these issues with, and again, I don't care if you're gay, straight, or anything in between. That means nothing to me. I don't care. That's your business. But now all of a sudden we feel like we have to have a label in order to be relevant. And we are
Yeah.
creating these things. And my fear is, because we're doing this, you know who's not doing it? China. And
That's right.
we are growing a generation of, excuse my French, pussies that are not only going to fail our military, but they're going to fail our company and our country as a whole. And that is what gets me really scared. You and I learned God, country, core. Okay.
That's right.
And that is, all three of those seem to be going away now. And I fear the long-term effect of that to our future.
Well, we need we need strength in this country. There's no doubt about it. And if we can't provide strength, if we can't strengthen our military up, especially, um, we're going to run into danger. And you brought up something that's really important. I've thought about this for a long time regarding labels. I observe, I listen to what people are saying, and I really look at things through that leadership warrior lens. And did they sound like a leader? Were they being a warrior in this moment? And it's interesting because we're in an era where nobody wants to be labeled, and yet we have more labels than at any other time in our history. And so there's a contradiction. And here's what I believe. I believe that all of the labels, everything that you can be, whatever you want to be, all those things, it really boils down to that sense of belonging that the military provided us. One of the number one things, and I'm not saying you have to go through boot camp and you have to go into combat to feel a sense of belonging, but that's actually one of the benefit tags that the Marine Corps uses when they're looking for new recruits is, do you want a sense of belonging? Because we'll provide that to you. I think that people are missing a sense of belonging. They're missing the camaraderie. They're missing that brotherhood or sisterhood that's in the warrior mindset. So for me, when I never feel alone, even when I travel by myself, because if I have my Marine Corps hat on, there's some vet or especially some jarhead that's going to come out of the woodwork and embrace you as a brother, no matter where you are in this
Especially
country.
that 89-year-old one in that wheelchair that's in the absolute sunset of his life, and you feel a connection to him like you've never felt with anybody, and you realize he may be storing the beaches at
That's right.
Iwo Jima. He maybe was at the Chosin Reservoir, and you get to talk to him. I talked to a guy that served directly under Chesty Puller over in
Jeez.
Korea. It was amazing. He didn't have very good things to say about him, but that's how I know he actually served underneath him. But
Yeah,
it was awesome.
that's right. You don't always have to be liked as a leader, but you want to be respected. Uh,
I want
but
to
it
go over
is,
something real quick that you
yeah,
mentioned
yeah,
also, because this is really important. We have a epidemic problem of veteran suicide. We just lost a drill instructor yesterday on Paris Island, one of the best drill instructors on the island, and it's devastating. That's on active duty. What about when you get off active duty? There's
that's
three
right.
things that happen that end up having you result in making that horrible final decision. Number one, you stop moving. I gained 50 pounds within a year or two of getting out of the infantry because you're used to these high caloric needs, but yet you're not exercising. There's a
That's
real
right.
connection between the mind, the body, and the spirit also. Number two, you just talked about it. You miss that fire team. You miss your brothers and sisters. Even though these are people you probably wouldn't even have said hi to if they were walking down the street before you went in, they're your brothers now. And you may have nothing in common with them now except that EGA or that military service.
Yeah,
So you miss that. And as a result of that, when things start happening that are bad, you miss that opportunity to be able to share that. The third one, which is the real dangerous one, and that is you lose your sense of purpose.
that's
And
correct.
once you lose your sense of purpose, as a young Lance Corporal, when they played colors, it was a pain in the ass. You had to stop your vehicle, get out,
Yep.
stand at attention. Same thing at TAPS, but it grounded you. It let you know why you were there. From the time you woke up to the time you went to bed, it was about the flag and our country and what it
Yeah,
represents. You got people that don't even not only kneel or salute the flag now, they're kneeling for the flag. And it's
right.
ridiculous. And
It
so
is.
giving you purpose, and my goal is that purpose should be small business ownership and entrepreneurship. You are
I love it.
becoming a great American. You're giving back to your country. You're employing others. You're creating all those connections. And if we really want to get serious about fighting veteran suicide, just check on your buddy. Pick up the
Right.
phone, call your buddy up, just say how you're doing, even if he doesn't pick up, just to know he's there. And then get them involved in something. It could be working at a soup kitchen, it could be cleaning up trash, it could just be
That's right.
hanging out at the local VFW or the bar. Just do something. Have that
It's,
purpose.
I think it's so interesting that being that purpose-driven warrior, I think they just go hand in hand. And I know when I got out, you're kind of you're an excitement to you to start the new journey in your life, and you don't have Big Brother watching over you anymore. But it isn't too long after he's gone that or you're gone that you miss him, and you miss some of the attributes of that. Now, I remember it took me a while to realize I didn't have to put a cover on going outside anymore. I didn't have to shave every day. But then there was a part of me that missed it, and especially that camaraderie side of things, where Here's part of that warrior mindset of looking out for the Marine or the soldier or the sailor to your left and right. And in the business sector, that's very much missing, and you can feel it in there. And from a coaching standpoint, I often share the importance of looking out for the team member to your left and the team member to your right. And when I share that in the business sector, it's almost revolutionary. It's like they never thought of that before, because even though they say it's a team in business, it's very much a group, and it's very much a group of individuals rather than a team of leaders that are looking out for each other. And you can feel it. In fact, I was telling you, I was meeting up with Master Sergeant Tresley this morning on a recruiting call. One of my daughter's friends is interested in the Marine Corps, so I got to go sit in on that. And he was just talking about that camaraderie and that sense of belonging. And this kid's eyes just lit up. I believe people want to be a part of something special, and they want to be a part of something great. And there's people like you and I out there, Zach, that are providing that through the business warrior side of things, for the business to the warrior entrepreneurship side of things. And it's needed more than people even realize it, because maybe you can share your thoughts on this. But when I share warrior mindsets, like I'll say this, and here's my favorite one from my new book: business workers show up to work, business warriors show up to win. And immediately people start to go, wait a minute, I know which one I am. And I'm not saying there's anything bad with a worker. They need to work. But a warrior is different. They have a different mindset. So for you, what is your distinction in that warrior mindset? Like, what separates a warrior from you, from workers, if you will, from the average person?
There's so many different things, but I think we could settle it with three simple letters: WHY, the
Okay.
why. Most companies focus on what they do. The good companies focus on how they do it, but the revolutionary companies focus on the why. And the example used was Apple. Apple charges $2,000 for their computers. It's been $2,000 since the 1980s. It's $2,000 today for their top of the line computer. They never talk about the processor. They never talk about the speed. All they talk about is think differently. You walk into an Apple store and the why is there. First of all, nobody should ever be that happy working in a job as the people working the Apple store. The experience is transformational. The why is there. You want to just do anything you can to be associated with that brand. Same thing with Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson probably sells 100 t-shirts for every motorcycle. They're a motorcycle company that makes more money off t-shirts, because what do you represent when you wear that Harley?
That's right. You're part of something.
Another example, right? So words like purpose and why, those are the real differences that makes the warrior, because the warrior's why is a cause that is bigger than their life. They are willing to put their life on the line for a cause, for their why. Now, I'm not saying that you need to do that in business, but when you get to these large companies, you need to ask people, what is our mission statement? What is our core values? And if they don't know that, that's a leadership failure.
That's right.
I love the concept of Napoleon's corporal. Napoleon Corporal's philosophy was Napoleon would give his command to his generals, and then he'd wait a day or so, and then he'd find a corporal and he'd ask them what the mission was. And if the corporal couldn't explain it to Napoleon, then it was too complicated and his leaders weren't doing a good job disseminating that out. Right. You have that same responsibility as a CEO or a senior leader in your organization to talk to that person that was hired 3 or 4 weeks ago. Ask them, why are we here? What do we do? What is important to us? And by the way, if they just say making money, they're in the wrong business. That's because right. Money is the scorecard that tells you how good you're doing.
Right.
But if you only care about money, there's a word for it. It's called being a whore, and you'll do anything you can to get the most amount of money. That's the right. opposite of the why.
It's interesting. I even say, when we're talking about the who, what, when, where, how, why, all those things that make up the uniqueness of a business, having that purpose is so important. And most people can't tell you the purpose of their business. They're not purpose driven, they're paycheck driven. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the biggest problem is. Now, we certainly enjoyed our paychecks in the Marine Corps, even though they were small, but we were so purpose driven. We knew why we were doing things. And here's one thing I would even add. One of the things that I share about being a warrior is we're very aware of our who. We know who our who is. It's the Marine to our left, the Marine to our right. It's our families. It's our friends. It's the ones that we take the oath, but we typically take it for our who. We're going to defend our families. We're going to defend our fellow Americans. And then once you get into that warrior mindset, and you look out, there's nothing greater than looking out for that Marine or that person to your left and right. So we have to be able to move beyond just what we do and identify who we're doing it for, why we're doing it. And I think just wrap ourselves in that purpose. And that's missing in so many organizations. I even think it's missing in charity organizations where their whole focus is purpose. I think that it sometimes comes too much to the money, right? Too much to the donations and the fundraising, and they stop even talking about their purpose.
Right. Look, our motto is Semper Fidelis, always faithful. And when it really comes down to it, and I never was in combat, but when you talk to people that were in combat and you read stories about World War One and other stuff, they're not fighting for their country. They're not fighting for their Marine Corps. They're not fighting for their unit. They're fighting for one thing: their buddies on their left and their right.
That's right.
And that's the same thing we need to think about in our businesses. When you're working in the cubicle farm, your buddy on your left and your right, if the clock hits 5 and you're ready to go home, but you can tell someone else is struggling with a project, help them out.
That's right.
That's your battle buddy. That they're in the trenches with you. And because they're going to help you out. And but also, what does that say to everybody else? It says that the mission is more important than me. And if they're not doing it, that's because they don't either know your why as a company,
That's
or
right.
they don't believe in the why as your company.
I think that, that warrior mindset, just getting them to look out, here's our purpose and here's our people. Once you embrace the purpose and look after your people, I really feel that your business is unstoppable, that there's nothing that can get in there. When I ran the media company in Southern California, it's not that we had better products and services than our competitors. It was very similar. We had better people and we understood our purpose. We were purpose driven and people focused. And that was where I feel that our true strength was. Whereas our competitors were bottom line focused. It was all about the pay, all about the profit. And of course, you should have a healthy bottom line. But if you don't have a strong people factor, you'll be out of business pretty soon, or you'll at least lose your business to the organizations that know their purpose and their people.
So the two biggest brands right now, probably in our country, is Starbucks and Apple. And when you walk into Starbucks, they are not a store that sells coffee. They are a store that builds communities.
That's right.
They're trained by their baristas to be happy and friendly. Most people aren't happy when they walk in to get a cup of coffee because they're tired or they're stressed out. Every person that works there is happy. When you go into that Apple store, again, they're too excited. You were so frustrated because your phone's not working, your computer's crashing. Right. Somehow they end up like making jokes and they make you happy about it. There's no other company. You call up Dell on the phone, and by the time you get a hold of a live representative, you're ready to kill somebody because they don't get it. Where Apple, they diffuse it. So to your point, the purpose, the why, the people, that's the stuff that really gets you to that next level.
That's right. I even heard
That's
Starbucks.
hard to do. It's a lot harder to do than hiring for skill, is to hire people for heart and for core values and focus.
Oh, 100%. I heard Starbucks refer to themselves as, probably their CEO, as the place in between work and home where you stop off. And so they were part of your journey. And I can't tell you, I've written books inside of Starbucks. I meet with clients. I just met with the recruiter and this young kid at Starbucks. And the Starbucks closest to my home, most of the baristas know my name.
And they know what your drink is too.
Yeah, no, they do. They do. Are you getting the rig? I feel like Norm from Cheers when I walk in, except I bring people with me
across the line, and to be as large as that is, to do that, it's just amazing. That's why they can charge $7 for a cup of coffee that you can get at McDonald's for 50 cents. And there's a lot of people that say McDonald's coffee is better, but it's the experience and it's that whole brand and the way that it makes you feel.
And I think that, that was something early on. I expected to be trained in the Marine Corps. We were trained with our rifles. Every Marine's a rifleman. So as we went through that whole warrior transformation, we were trained to rappel, trained to run, like you said, trained to go to the bathroom. We know how to do it. Some of the unexpected things in the Marine Corps was just that focus on our purpose, that focus on our people. I mean, everything was about teamwork. Everything was about the mission. Everything was about the core values: honor, courage, commitment, God, country, core. They did a lot with the rule of 3, or even JJ did tie buckle, the 14 leadership traits. All these things gave us purpose. They let us know who we are, not just what we do. And that's one of the biggest things I share, because when I walk into businesses, and I'm sure you see it too and feel it, they're missing some of those qualities. They say it because I'll ask all the time, "What's your greatest asset?" Everybody says people, and I'll say, "Can you prove it? How do you prove that day in and day out?" If your people are a greater asset than profits, I'm just guessing initially, most of these companies spend more time talking about profits than people. So it gets a lot of lip service out there. I I sometimes have people look at me like a deer in the headlights when I say the Marine Corps is the most human organization I've ever been involved with. They just get it. They get it. I mean, how can I leave in 1991 and still feel a part of it? You know, I was already talking to a top trust lead today about where the ball is going to be held this year. And I'm bringing more people every year with me. I'm building my own platoon. I mean, how many people still go to a work party 30 years after they've been out, you
There's
know?
a there's an article that just came out this week in Task and Purpose, a big military kind of thing, and it said that we're in trouble because 70% of active duty soldiers do not recommend their children to go in the military. That's how, because that's the best recruiter is not the recruiter in the dress blues. It's you
That's right.
sharing those things and those type of
A
things. So
hundred
that's
percent.
where the real difference comes in there. I do want to share three last things as we're wrapping up here. And those are the kind of fits into what we were talking about. And when I'm investing in a company, when I'm helping a company, I always
Yeah.
ask these three questions for entrepreneurship. Number one, what is the problem you solve in a unique and elegant way? Again,
Hmm.
it's not the features and benefits of your coffee, it's the problem you solve, which again, a place that's happy, a place that
That's
you
right.
can play it. Number two, you have to have an unfair competitive business advantage. Not illegal, not unethical, but it needs to
Right.
be unfair. Think of David and Goliath. You're going to be going up against these really big companies. David beat Goliath not because he was stronger or faster. He beat Goliath because A, David fought on his terms, and
Right.
B, he didn't do what Goliath told him to do, which was come to him. And then the third thing, you got to have really good sales, marketing, and distribution. You can have the
And
greatest product in the world, but if people don't know about it and you can't get it out there, you're not going to be successful. And one of the biggest problems entrepreneurs have is the fact that they don't want to tell anybody their idea because they're afraid they're going to steal it, or they
that's
spend all
right.
this money on a patent, which is the worst thing an entrepreneur can do because they think, oh, I've got this patent. Well, that it's only worth what you're willing to spend to defend it.
That's
And the
right.
company that can
That's
rip you off
absolutely
is
right.
not going to be Erik or Zach. It's going to be Procter and Gamble or IBM. And guess what? They've got attorneys on retainer. So spend that money you would have spent on patent on new product development, on social media outreach, on getting in
That's right.
touch with other people, connect it together and use that why to pull all that together.
So awesome. I mean, everything that you're sharing, Zach, is so relevant, so important, especially in today's day and age. If somebody's listening right now, one of the Think Great listeners is listening, says, "Hey, I got to get my warrior entrepreneur aligned." What would be some recommendations you have for somebody just looking to achieve greatness in their life, their business, moving forward, starting up uh, their dream, small business, as you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's first of all, help others. Again, like I said before, you got to solve a problem. Don't focus on the features and benefits. Focus on what that problem is that you're solving and how you can help other people. I
Yeah,
believe that there is truly a natural energy that's out there. You put good energy out, good energy is going to come back to you. But embrace the suck. It was a common saying that we had, and not to toot my own horn here or be self promoting, but the book that I wrote is really my Bible of those things, Warrior Entrepreneur. And you go through this, it's not a book you necessarily read cover to cover. There's sections, and you can go back to the
yeah.
section on grit or on tenacity, on serenity, and just read a couple very short stories that will motivate you about those things that can help you get through some of those difficult things in your journey.
I think that's just awesome. I think that having those books that are, they can continue to be that roadmap for them, and they can go back and plug into the certain chapters or sections that they need is it's worth its weight in gold. And so if some of our listeners are needing to get a hold of you, let's say they got a keynote speech coming up, let's say they want to learn more about your warrior mindset, being a warrior entrepreneur, what's the best way for them to reach out, find out more information, or get in contact with you?
So my portal site is warriorleader.us, and that takes you open to all my other ones. So I have a website, listentozach.com for my keynote speaking. I have the Warrior Academy, Academe is how it's
Okay.
spelled the way that Plato spelled it, because he believes that learning happens outside the classroom.
Nice.
That gets information, warriorentrepreneurbook.com. And again, all you got to do is go to warriorleader.us. And I've never shared this before, but since we got a chance to talk about it, if you want to check out behind me and hear about where I'm sitting, you can go to teufelhundentavern.com,
Beautiful.
TEUFELHUNDEN tavern.com. There is a riddle that if a Marine gets that riddle right and they're down in Hilton Head, they earn themselves a free glass of bourbon and a trip over here to the tavern.
I'm going to be heading to that site as soon as we wrap up here. You know, Zach, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on the show and sharing some of your warrior wisdom with us. I feel that this is going to be a catalyst for two warriors, you and me, teaming up and helping to bring the warrior mindset, not only throughout businesses across this country, but I think in the personal world of people too, that, you know, that warrior mindset helps you to be a better person in general, but certainly on the home front. So I'm looking forward to teaming up with you and starting to form a platoon and eventually a battalion and a brigade and making a
Brother,
huge impact.
that's what it's all about. We're all in
Yep,
this together, and you know, we continue to serve our country long after we put our uniform down. And
that's right.
I'm so excited to meet you virtually. I can't wait to meet you in person, and I'm most excited about what we have and opportunities in front of us to help our fellow veterans and warriors.
Yeah, me too, Zach. Thank you so much and Semper Fi, brother.
Semper Fi.